Welcome to the BYOB podcast. Today I have a special guest who has been working with us for quite some time now, a few years, I think. And she's a specialist in the architectural industry, and I'm really interested to hear education, working, setting up new businesses, etc., because that's sort of where I've come from as well, through the education and also through industry. So I'd like to welcome to the show Sarah Hobday-North.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Andrew.
So, for those who haven't checked out our links yet, I'd just like you to introduce yourself and tell people what you do now and what you do, and then we're going to delve back into the past because that's what we like to do to get into your story a little bit way. So, tell us a bit about yourself.
Okie dokie. Yeah, I'm a registered architect down here in Victoria, and I am the child of architects. I grew up quite literally under a drawing board. Both my mother and my stepfather were in business together for 35 years.
Wow.
And so I've done everything in architecture practice, from making the tea and doing the photocopying and doing the wet ammonia printing for the veterans out
I
there.
don't even know what that is, but it sounds interesting.
Right through to being an architect myself. It's led me, to my surprise, rather than being on a creative journey per se in the architectural sense, it's taken me on a business and service and practice journey, because a lot of the issue I find with architecture is actually how we connect with clients and how we communicate our value to others. So to address that gap, which I've seen from inside the industry and from outside, where I'm now a tutor. We've spoken about my detour through education, touched on it. We'll get into that, I'm sure. I have created and launched only last November a new architectural platform called Architect GP to make accessing an architect about your home as normal as going to a doctor about your health. I want, in some ways, to make architecture normal and boring and not glamorous and exclusive, in the way going to see a doctor, going to see an accountant, and going to see a lawyer are everyday sorts of things. I want to take architecture out of the grand designs exclusive bracket and actually make it a normal, valuable, accessible service for every homeowner out there.
Yeah, I love that. And we've had some conversations about some particular things I needed, and one of our employees, Shini, also consulted you on some services because we're kind of afraid to talk to architects. It's like we don't know how it works.
Yeah.
We're unsure of the costs and the value. And so you're exactly right. Even though I love Kevin McLeod and Grand Designs, watching the show,
Sure.
it's not everyone's taking a life-changing journey building their own house. It's like, I wanted just a
But
room in an
that's the
office.
thing.
It's
For everyone, it can be a life-changing journey, or a life-affirming journey, or just a relief that something got done and you've made the good decisions. It can always be a transformative thing, but not every version of it is going to be exciting enough to put into a television program.
yeah.
Just as not every GP consultancy, you don't want to put that on TV. Instead,
Well, you
it's
don't
the
want it to be
turned up to
life-changing.
11
You want it to be,
version
it's fine.
of Grey's Anatomy, and
That's right.
that's it. You want your conversations with the GP to actually be really boring, really manageable, and not exciting at all. And in many ways, the analogy extends to design and architecture, and which really what we're meaning with architecture, I think, is a shorthand for working with a trained professional who understands not just the beauty of design and the aesthetics of design and all that stuff, but they also understand the design and construction process, and there are some architects who will take you by the hand and guide you through and basically do it for, if not with you, and others, which is more where I come in, who are more like hire the architect by the hour, or get the advice you need at those key points when you need it, so that you're not asking your very well-meaning sister-in-law who did a reno 2 years ago what she did in this situation. And, we've all got connections to this industry in one way or another. But the architect is the most, just as an objective fact, the most highly qualified design professional there is. And we see the process roll out again and again and again. And that's experience that I want more people to be able to feel comfortable accessing and approaching.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And we'll talk more about how that actually works in a moment. But I wanted to take you back
Yeah.
to, we loved going back in history because, the reason people start their own businesses is many and varied. It sounds like your journey is a little bit like mine. I grew up with a family business all around me, and that's all I ever wanted to do was be part of it. So is that how it worked for you? Was there a big drafting table in your lounge room? And, we used to sell them, those drafting tables, believe it or not, back at our,
There we go. Oh, yeah, you were in stationery
yeah,
and
office
everything
product.
in
Yeah.
between. Yeah. No, the drafting boards, probably the last one of my parents got thrown out in the early 2000s, and now everything is
Yeah,
CAD,
it's okay. Yeah.
meaning computer aided design and drafting. Though everyone should be doing 3D integrated
Oh,
stuff.
3D stuff's amazing. Changed my life when I saw
3D.
that for the first time. But I wanted to know about your first
Exactly.
job
Yeah.
before you, were you a
Yes.
newspaper
Look, my
girl or?
first paid job, I was thinking about this. I think the first paid job I can remember was my mum asking me to sit down with a pile of, discarded half-written letters and computer printouts and the office guillotine, the manual guillotine, and saying, I'll pay you $3 if you can shred all
Not
this
even with a shredder.
manually. So I was employed, actually, that's, I think, more lowly than making coffee. So I was employed as the office shredder for an afternoon. So look, it's being a family business, I've always been there helping, typing a letter, doing things from a young age there, and gradually doing more as I learnt more. But I think my first real paid job was in waitressing. I grew up in Werribee, and I worked at the local Thai restaurant where I got to dress up in the full
Oh,
Thai
wow.
traditional costume. So I had this silk skirt which you wrapped around, and there was a gold belt which you folded over the top to hold it all together. And then there was this beautiful concertina fabric which you wrapped around yourself and flung over one shoulder.
Yeah.
So I was a relatively tall, very white female dressed up
How did you pass that off?
in this beautiful silk costume every shift.
Oh, wow.
So that was when I was 15, my first job there. And later in uni, I stuck with the hospitality. I had a job at an Indian restaurant as well when
You
I
just
when I
reuse
was
the
at
outfit. It's very similar.
university. I had to leave the outfit, but yeah, my first night there, I just got my P plates, like within months tops, and they sent me out on a delivery, night driving in the boss's car with the
That's
curry and
nerve-wracking.
the naans on the back seat, and my gosh, it was nerve-wracking because anyway, nothing bad happened, and, and everything was fine. I thought I might go into hospitality for a while. I'm a keen cook as well, but I think fortunately I didn't.
Did your parents want you to go into architecture, or did they warn you off it?
I think they're not unhappy that I did. I think they feel, I believe, a certain pride. I must have been inspired somewhat by what they did to have walked the same path. But there was a good chunk of time where I was quite sure that I would not be an architect. Partly in my softcore version of teenage defiance. It's not just gonna do what Mum and Nev are doing. I was always academic at school, always did well, so university was always going to be the pathway. In year 10, I started saying I was going to be a doctor just because it wasn't architecture and you had to go to uni for that. So, it was this odd situation of I genuinely felt like I had to choose the career, I don't know a better way to say it, but sort of at my level or what I felt other people's expectations of me were. A professional career was always going to be where it was at. But in the end, in year 12, I had to put I had to put things down on the, university intake forms, and it was architecture all the way down.
Yeah.
Just the institution or the course name changed. And then I even, through uni, I kind of resisted. I sort of felt like I had an unfair advantage, and that didn't sit well with me.
Wow.
So
Most people
I
love an
often
unfair.
rejected or pushed back on my parents offering help, or I felt because there was this guilt of, or feeling like it's not my work, it's their work. And I found that very hard to distinguish between. But in time, you develop your own better sense of self. And
Yeah.
obviously, I'm confident I'm doing my own thing now.
That's great. And so when you went through university, I noticed that you seemed to work at the university pretty early on in research.
I worked as a college tutor in my third year, I think. So it was using the fact that I knew the content. If you know Melbourne University, there's the famous College Crescent, the curved road around the back of the university where all the old and not so old colleges are. And so once or twice a week in the evenings, I'd go down to one or two of the colleges and basically run a class for the students there in a subject that I'd, done 2 or 3 years beforehand. That was before I'd done any education formal study. So looking back on it, it shows me that I've always had a connection. There's always been an appeal for education and in a formal setting. I mean, we're all teachers
Yeah.
at some point, even being that person in the office that people come to for advice. It's a teaching role. They're learning from your expertise. But it seems I've always been drawn to teaching in a more formal capacity as well.
Yeah. People who learn well generally want to teach, it seems. They have an interest in education in general. I find myself
Yeah,
gravitating.
that's an interesting comment. I think people who've had to work hard to learn make good teachers because they've had to sort of go through some of the difficult thought patterns and get over the blocks and learn the way the students learn. And so rather than if something comes easy to someone, it might be difficult for them to teach it because it's like, well, don't you just get it? I did.
It's a very good
You
point.
know.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've had to really think it through and learn it yourself, then you can make it easier for the next round of learners because you've got some insight into what they're
Yeah.
struggling
Makes
with.
you a better teacher. So, because
I think so.
my first tutor in high school, because I was not good at school, it was always Andrew could do better if he applied himself and started talking to his friends. He got 100% for English in VCE, which was like remarkable. He
Wow.
actually went on one of those shows, on quiz shows, and like won a whole bunch of money, like Sale of the Century or one of those. And then went into the school system, so became like a vice principal somewhere or other, an English teacher. But I remember him
Yep.
teaching me, and he was kind of like that. He's just like, why don't you get this? Why do you find this hard? Whereas I struggled
Yeah.
through school, and then I did really well at university, and now I'm a teacher. And you're actually really, really right. Is that he gravitated towards education was easy, but I gravitated because I felt like I could help people through my experience. So interesting how that plays
Yep.
out. And I still teach to this day, as you probably do, because
Yes.
it's just a nice way to give back.
Look, I'm even more humble than that because I'd say it's a great way to keep up. Even your previous guests have noted that there can be a rift between what's taught in university and what's needed on the ground in business or in a specific industry, and that lag is always an issue. So on the one hand, yes, we as professionals coming back can give back to students with contemporary, in the moment perspective on things and skills. But the background and the grounding in research that from which these courses emerge gives me incredible PD because in architecture, I'm teaching at Monash at the moment in a subject called architectural performance. So how buildings perform, how to make them comfortable, how to make them low energy, and how to actually do that. The materials technology that's happened in the last 20 years since I was doing semi-equivalent subjects is huge. The tools that are available to assess and report on these things have transformed in even the last 5 years. Public awareness of sustainability and the desire the hunger from the client, from the consumer for energy positive and higher energy performing buildings has changed as well. So I find by staying connected with the universities, you get a tap to other bits that are current in industry. So the lag goes both ways. Professional life in some ways lags behind the research, and in other ways the slow ship of the university institution will always lag behind the agile business that has to constantly adapt.
Yeah.
So I find it a really rewarding two-way street.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in marketing and particularly in digital, that I teach at the moment, is that although universities could never keep up with the changes in digital because it's just constant, the thing is it's quite distracting for students because they think they know all about digital because they use it every day. But being a user and being a practitioner is kind of, I can drive a car, I'm not a race car driver. And so what I find is they forget the basics, and the university is a really good grounding in that, yeah, you need to have some strategy and you need to have some models and ways of
Yeah.
researching, not just jumping to, well, I like TikTok, so everyone should do TikTok. I think that is the natural ebb and flow of hard-won theories versus the
Yeah.
latest tech or the latest fad. And so that's why I like university
Yeah.
life for that reason.
Yes, it has to be. There's a rigor to university life, and ultimately, it's a safe space to fail. It should be, and it's a safe space to learn the complexity of thought that goes into a simple solution. Can actually it represents thousands of hours of professional development in order to have that
Yeah.
simple realization. So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to have the depth to the iceberg as well as the tip.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. It's good. So fast forward to when you were
Yep.
working in architectural practice. Did you work for your parents
Yeah,
first, or did you go out on your own,
I
or
did. So yes, I worked for my parents
how was
first.
that dynamic? Was it
In some
kind of
ways, you'd be
tricky?
mad not. Yeah, look, I think we did pretty well, really. I
Yeah.
think we did pretty well. I worked hard. I wasn't going to be there just because I was the boss's daughter. That's not me.
Mm.
And so I think I put in extra. Well, I worked as if it was, you know, as if I really had needed to interview and put in my CV for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
job,
yeah.
which of course technically, which I didn't. With them, I got my grounding in doing residential work, which full circle. I'm now solidly residential now. But I got my first taste of something new in architecture that could be mine. My first love was urban design. So, not just the way a home goes together, but the way cities go together, the way neighbourhoods and communities go together, and learning about the bigger design elements which go into city design. So it's sort of where if it's in a Venn diagram, it's between architecture and urban planning and infrastructure, and it's all a wonderful smooshy area of city design. I followed that to London, and I worked for Building Design Partnership for 2.5 years, all up, as a junior, as a graduate in their urban design department. And it was great. We had urban designers up there, we had landscape architects, we had planners, and that was doing master plan proposals for city councils all around England and internationally as well. So I worked on a major development proposal for Kolkata in India.
Oh, wow.
But then, so this was all happening in 2008, and then the GFC hit.
Mm.
And and all of a sudden the big developers in India didn't have money anymore, and a lot of the local borough councils, their strategies changed. I kept my job. I worked through the GFC in London. My delightful elder statesman of a boss said he wanted to sew my socks to the carpet, which I thought was just could only come from an English boss. I
Yeah,
thought that was beautiful.
that's grand.
So I came, but I did return to Melbourne, and that was a lifestyle choice. It's like, okay,
Well, we're very livable.
where am I really going to live?
Is this the livable city that we talk about? Is it true with your urban design?
For me, it is. Many bits of Melbourne wonderfully livable. Along with many, I do have, concerns about those low density areas of Melbourne where there's no infrastructure. It's all houses, low density subdivisions with one bus every hour, etc. You get marooned, and it's not just about how pretty a street looks. It means that people can't walk to the shops, and so they get in the car, and that has congestion implications and it has health implications. There is such a thing as a healthy city and an environment that supports a healthy physical and mental life. So there's many layers, and that's why I want to see more architects, more opinion pieces from architects and things when these big topics of city planning come into.
Here's my bugbear. I've been writing about architecture on LinkedIn, and obviously I'm not an architect and I've only worked with a few. But what I find is they're as a group not very advanced with marketing, not very willing to put their personal brand out there. They want to have a website with nothing on it but some pictures of all the work they've done.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Is that built in at university?
This is a huge issue in the industry, and there are specialist architect marketers and business coaches who are filling this space and trying to drag the profession forwards. Where does it come from? Here's where it comes from. Until the 1970s, it was illegal for architects to advertise.
Same with dentists, yeah.
We were a noble profession and we didn't compete on price. There was a fixed percentage scale fee for everyone so there was no business nous at all because you didn't compete on fee. Everyone was meant to know what an architect did. It was meant to be self-evident. Your work was meant to speak for itself. And as a consequence, we were kind of left at a standing start when the world changed. So just as you don't see your local medical clinic, advertising as such, you can be aware that the clinic is down the road, but you don't see doctors advertising on television. I think they still have restrictions on how they advertise and the extent to which. So architecture used to be in that category. We have been slow to catch up. I think the other aspect of it is a latent belief in the profession in a kind of that there is a architect-patron relationship rather than an architect-customer relationship. So the idea that the architect is the artist and the client is meant to sort of, well, I need a house, and so the architect will provide and draw me a beautiful house, and sort of it's a hands-off thing, which speaks to a different era and a kind of oldie worldy relationship where deals were with handshakes and that kind of. It's odd, but I want to see a architecture profession where we even refer to where we think of a professional customer relationship, which even says something else than a client relationship. I mean, clients is a perfectly good term, but mentally, if architects can think about our clients as customers, meaning they have a stake, funnily enough, in the output, they're the one paying for it, and two that are either going to live in it or work in it or use its utility, even if they're a developer. That shifts the professional relationship, and that's got to be where we're going, and the quicker we do it, the better.
Well, it's interesting. It is a big change even in marketing, because marketing back in the day was really advertising. If we think about purists, and back in the day it was only big companies. So you're a big advertising agency, and it was that professional sort of aspect, and digital really changed all of that. I mean, you could only advertise through TV or radio, and you couldn't do it without an agency. And so even when I joined marketing, that was the case, is that you had to have a media buying agency, you had to have a creative agency, it cost millions. It was out of the reach of the average business. And so the average business didn't do that. They might put a sign out or some leaflets, and 2000 comes internet and social media and websites, and it all changes. It's an egalitarian approach now. Like, we do a lot of marketing for doctors. They're generally specialists. Because they're specialists, people need to be able to find them for their speciality, and they look online. We don't do a lot of GPs because GPs are geographically located. They're always busy, but the specialists need marketing. That's why we fulfill that space with, and lawyers and architects and other professionals, because now they want to have a voice. And some people are resistant, some are not. Dentists are resistant because they grew up with the same thing. Is one of my dentist clients said that they're only allowed to have a brass plaque on the outside of the door of a certain size. It was like it could only be this
Yep.
size, and that was it. You're not allowed. And then the world changed, and then they had to, go, well, I do ortho dentistry, or I do pediatrics, or I specialize in.
Yeah.
And so it's all changing, but architecture seems to be one of the last, particularly because they in their digital requires words, and they don't want to explain. It's like art. It's like, I don't want to tell you what the painting is. You should interpret it yourself. I feel like it's got that artistic. I wrote a blog about it, actually, put it on LinkedIn just recently about it. And I drew that parallel between artistry and architecture because I feel like it is closer to that than obviously building. And you obviously said the same words. But it seems like is that true that they don't want to express it in words? Is that a truism to you?
Architects, they have difficulty. It is more challenging to express it in words, again, because of this culture of the work should speak for itself. But the thing is, unless you, the architect, are putting the message out there, the message that someone gets or doesn't get from an image is completely subjective. One challenge for architects is to stop using archi-speak. So let's not talk about materiality and juxtaposition and interstitial spaces
I haven't heard that one before.
whatever it might. All that interstitial space, something in between.
Okay. There you go.
The bit in between two other things is the interstitial space. I think a habit from the way we're taught to write about space and describe space, probably at university, is a hangover. And the challenge for architects is to write about their work in a way that describes to the client what the benefit of that will be. So it's one thing to talk about the materiality of this, but we went through a rigorous selection process to choose this timber product because it was at the right price point for the client and had particular sustainability, sourceability credentials, and that put enough budget that the client could afford, to do the landscaping. It's like, so that speaks to an architect who considers materials holistically within what it achieves for the project.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. So rather than the beautiful photo and the material looking gorgeous, what is the other story there that connects the client to the decisions that the architect has guided them through, or the options that the architect presented to the client, the pros and cons that were presented so that the client could make a really informed decision. Because a building process, what it is, 100,000 decisions, just in a very close sequence. And once you've finished one round of decisions, you go to the next level of detail and there's another round of decisions to make. So the role of the architect one of the roles is to prioritise what decisions need to be made next and to give the client the researched information that the important ones that really do need the client input can be made in an informed way. Again, informed consent is a very familiar term in the medical industry. I want to see more of it in the architectural
I love it.
side
You're
of
a rebel.
things too. Huh? How fascinating. A rebel that I want to involve the client in their decision making or make that involvement more visible and experienced by the client. Because they're the one that's going to live in the house every day.
I mean, it's customer centricity. It is, and this is, with the way people can do ratings,
which is a global. Every
global
industry is going through its version of this.
Yeah.
And perhaps architecture is just feeling it a bit harder.
Well, the thing, like you said,
for historical reasons.
At the start, you said that make it more accessible, and architecture would have more clients if it was more accessible. It'd be a bigger business. People would have more, because I'm sure there are architects out there that don't have enough business. So if they want to get that, it's not a matter of, it's a, being more accessible to more clients, and also choosing your clients, having a
Yes,
choice of
yes.
clients and doing what you do specifically, not generically, is part of the marketing process. So there's benefits on both sides. It's not just about selling your wares. It's more about having the right sort of clients rock up to your door with the right sort of problems that you love to solve the most. And that's the really good part about branding and marketing. So,
Yeah, the term the right clients is an interesting one, because the implication is that there's the wrong clients, and that doesn't mean that a client is wrong in any way. There's nothing wrong with a wrong
no, it's
client
suitability.
fit.
It's suitability.
But what it speaks to is that the architecture business knows itself, knows its why. Why am I actually in business, and what do I want to achieve? And can be specific enough about what they're really good at, so that those people can find them.
Yeah.
And they know that that's their secret sauce and their superpower.
It's interesting you say that, because it's one thing, because we work in personal branding and professionals, you're buying the person as much as their knowledge and their ability to produce
Yeah.
something. If you can't talk to your doctor and relate to them, you're not going to have a very good GP relationship, because you
Yep.
need that person to be empathetic, to get you, to not judge you, to feel like you can. It's a relationship, and I think architecture is a very intimate relationship. It's like, what's more intimate than your home and how you live? And I think it's important that people get to understand who's behind these pretty pictures on their website, because if they don't, how can they know if they relate and can have that really strong rapport? Do you have the same
Yeah.
values and beliefs? I feel passionate
100%.
that that's an important change in the industry, because I don't see that. It's like pictures of houses first. Me, I'm on. Be lucky if there's a photo of us. Um,
Yeah.
so, which you do very
It
well on
is
your
it
branding.
is changing. It is changing, and I'm finding my bit of the tribe. I'm building a network and a tribe of people who do get it.
Mm,
And as you say, the architect client relationship is between real people. And you want to feel that you can be trusted and that your information is treated with respect. Because yes, you're right. Talking about your home is intensely personal.
mm.
Having an architect come and visit your home. Most people are apologising for mess, and oh, sorry, I didn't have time to fold the laundry before you arrived. And it's like, no, I'm not here. I'm not here to judge your house. I'm not here expecting that you're already going to have Vogue living. I don't even know if that's what you want. I want to learn about how you want your home envelope
Mm.
to be better, to what's not working for you, and to sit down at your table with a biscuit.
A cup of tea, hopefully. Um,
Yes.
so let's transition to when you actually decided to start your own thing. So you've been working for a
Yeah.
while. You're teaching, and you have a crazy idea to start a business. How did that? What was the catalyst?
No,
No.
that's not it. That's not how it happened. What happened first was burnout.
Ah.
What happened second was I've got to get out of architecture. I need a career change. What happened third was kids.
Ah. Yes, the great catalyst.
And a great big cascade of those things put me in a space where I was not mentally interested in a young early 30s woman with a kid. There is data's just been released. Our industry is terrible at retaining female talent once childbearing
Really?
age
Wow.
hits. It is that simple. A lot of women go sideways. They find allied professions or sideways steps in their career, and there is still a steep decline in participation from women in the architecture industry once you go over 30.
Is that just the number of hours required, or is it the
Yeah,
culture?
it's a big part of office culture. It's difficult to get a part-time job in architecture. The thinking goes that, well, once something's on site, you've sort of got to be on call
Okay.
5 days a week,
Yeah.
9 hours a day, sort of thing. So there's the site culture, and there is also the design culture of of overtime and an idea of being seen to be dedicated, rather than going, I've given you my full dedication to up until 5 o'clock and now I'm going home because this isn't everything there is to me. So there's cultural issues there for sure. I think at the last statistic there's about 950 sole practitioner female architects in Victoria. You know, we're a big demographic because we need that flexibility. We still love the profession that we've learned, but we are having to innovate in our business models because business as usual is still catching up to what, and there has been huge change and some practices are really leading the way. But yeah, it's coming from behind the finish line, behind the start line.
Yeah. So tell me about you. So you had all these sort of different things happening and you decided to start your own thing. So tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about what you're doing.
Yes. I'm really good at going off on a tangent every time you bring it back to this. Okay, so I thought the issue is education. So I'm going to go and do a dip ed, and I'm going to teach high school age people about the value of design, and that's how I'm gonna change my bit of the world. You know, by getting a love of design in at that stage. So I was working in architecture part-time, while doing a part-time dip ed at ACU. So that took me 2 years to get that qualification, and I resigned from my parents. I was working with them at the time, and I got a job at Brunswick Secondary College as their Viscom and art teacher, and massive respect to all the teachers in Australia because I completely crashed and burned out in 10 weeks.
Wow.
I was overloaded. I was the only Viscom teacher at the school and a graduate. So although I had all the design knowledge in quotation marks, the ability to translate that while you're running into lesson plans and to deliver them, and then to deal with assessment of what you have delivered while you're preparing the next week's classes and the resources, and it was unsustainable. I couldn't do it with the personal and physical resources I had at the time. So I had to leave teaching, and then I went, oh my God, what's
what are you going to do now?
What do I do? I've left architecture and now teaching didn't work. And would you believe at that time is when I found out I was going to be having my first kid.
So timing.
Never a dull moment in life. So while I nurtured and built this baby, which was happening miraculously kind of all on its own, the body just knows what to do, I went, okay, well, I still have a brain and I still have knowledge. So I printed my first business cards, and it was just Sarah Hobday-North, architect. And I did some consulting work, working on briefing and project planning within the family and for friends. And then it's like, well, I better get an ABN. And my first little shingle, let me think, was Melbourne Architecture, because I got the domain for melbournearchitecture.com, and I thought that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Nah. Moved on. So I used that brand for a while and got work with some local community groups. My friend was a lawyer. He was working in Fitzroy Legal Service, and they needed some advice, and he was on their committee, and so that got me into community design. You know, how does a community group with no budget plan to relocate their office, and will we have enough desks, and how are we going to fit in our storage, and is the square meterage enough? So I could do that analysis for them with a design and with a spatial lens. So that tracked along, and then it evolved, and I created My Architect, but I ran into IP Australia issues there that had already been trademarked with IP Australia, and they're doing some great work with their network of architects. So I pivoted and went, right, I've got the concept, but I had to rebrand it, and then that became Value Architects Group.
Just a run.
Value Architects Group is still very much alive, and that's my brand and business vehicle when I go in deep with a project. So when I'm offering extended services to a client and being a capital A architect, if you like, that's my brand for that. But through Value Architects Group, I started experimenting with these short form consultancy services that allowed a potential client to book me for a couple of hours to go through their issues, to talk it through. So that was my first key innovation. And when I was offering them through Value Architects Group, they were called my advantage consultations. So getting an advantage, playing to your advantage, that went well. There was a modest, I wasn't doing a large amount of promotion at that time, and there was a good nibble and interest in this. And Value Architects Group probably tracked along for at least a couple of years, and I evolved and continued to change and refine the advantage consultation. Meanwhile, Twitter, as it still was back then, I became active there and found this network of like-minded architects. And you find one and they're connected to a couple of other good people, and then someone else chips in a conversation and you start following them. And so quite organically found and built my tribe. And with those, so then in August 2022 must have been, something clicked on that day and I went, right, I'm writing a proposal. This has been going around my head. So to 8 of my directly known and social media, probably for all of them for at least a year by that stage, I put down a proposal with the working title Architect GP, which became the real title, and said, I've got an idea. Do you like this in principle? The idea of a national network of architects who can be booked for short form consultancy. I don't know how it's going to work financially yet. We'll get there. But I know you guys have been frustrated by this as well. So are you in? And so of the 8 that I sent it out to, 4 was super keen and ended up being, I think 6 in the first instance became the core steering group. And we worked together through Zoom and emails for a year. They were kind of, I guess, they were a generous source of info and at times research. And they were also my steering group and sounding board. But I realised that over time, to make this happen, it was going to need a driver. So it wasn't going to work if we set it up as a committee structure or a formal not-for-profit or something like that. It's like, right, I've just got to do this. So I bit the bullet and went, right, I took all the info that we'd been building together, the pros and the cons, and went, okay, I need to actually build the business around this idea now. And I think it's around then that I got Social Star on board and said, I need a website that will allow me to tell this story and offer these services. And I then did a heap of writing out what I thought the core services that we were going to offer would be. And I worked with a copywriter and we fed all that into the website, and I had the steepest learning curve, and you're laughing at me and that's great. And photos and video content, and I'm still, there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
But it all came out of knowing that there was this community of people who got it, who I knew I wasn't crazy, because 6 strangers not really
Yeah.
strangers, but 6 people with their own lives and problems and everything were giving an hour a month, an hour a fortnight, whatever it was at the time, to talk about this stuff. So it's like, hey, no, I'm on to something.
Yeah.
There's a core idea here that matters. And that gave me the confidence and the initial core group to launch a small network, which has now doubled
Yeah.
from 5 to 10.
And it's just, to me, it's, as a homeowner and someone who does renovate a little bit, it's just such a genius idea, because it just gives you that starting point to talk to somebody, build a relationship, which could turn into a full-blown project, but also sort
Sure.
of demystifies it, because it's a scary, oh, if I talk to them, it's going to be suddenly I'm in for 100 grand to, renovate my house. And so it's,
Yeah.
as just a layman, it's a very good service. And I think that people who are in that market should definitely check it out. So, which brings me to my last question. So, knowing what you know now, if you were going back to 2 years ago when you were setting up your, or even setting up your own business, what would be some advice you'd give to those people sitting in that, who are in that crisis point of going, I need something new and different? What's the one piece of advice you'd give?
I'd say to them, you're closer than you think to the next thing that works.
Oh, I like that.
That when you've, whatever their version of having quit one job and having sort of stumbled out of what they thought was going to be their next career, the thing they'd pinned their hopes on, you still know what you know. And chances are you've got to a point where you've got a combination of experience which is unique. So there is something valuable there. Do what you can to give yourself time to think. Continue to go out and talk to people and with people. Bore people by talking about this latent good idea that you have. And you'll get to a point of going, well, let's give it a go. You may well need to do other things in the meantime and go get a job to pay the bills and all that stuff.
And that's very good advice. It's a long journey, isn't it?
But the thing is, you are closer than you could imagine to the next step. It feels like you've fallen down a pit, or you're a long way away, or you've lost your way. It's like, no, you're just somewhere you've never been before.
Yeah.
So take the time to reorientate yourself.
Love it.
It's going to be okay.
Love it. Love it. So how do they get in touch? Do you want them to go to the website? You want them to come down LinkedIn?
Yes. So if, by all means, you will find Sarah Hobday-North on LinkedIn, but I would love people to see the website at www.architectgp.au, and there's a contact form there, and that contact form comes straight to my inbox, because I'm there as the founder. I'm sort of the front door to the company, to the network, and anyone can book me for an Archie advice call for a mere $79.
Oh,
Really, we allow you to test drive architects. And not just a specific architect, but even test driving the whole working with an architect experience. Is it what it's cracked up to be? And if one of our architect GPs can't in 2 hours make you think, oh wow, that was actually really, really useful, then I'd say they haven't done their job.
well, it's just not for you.
Or it's not for you. You already have a different idea and a different pathway. But it allows you to test drive and to experience the value or not for yourself and make your own informed decision. So go to architectgp.au and find out.
Give it a go. For the cost of a time meal.
Find out all about it. Yeah. That's it.
All right, Sarah, it was
Cost of a nightly
lovely
takeaway.
talking to you. I always enjoy our conversations. I'm always learning things from you about that process.
Well, I think that's the best thing about running a podcast too. You're doing an hour of PD every time you have a chat with someone.
I know, it's great. I'll send you the $79. So. All right, nice to see you, Sarah. See you, Sarah.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.